Hi, Acadiana. Meteorologist Dave Baker here on a Wednesday afternoon. It's July the 16th. This is Let's Talk Tropics. We're still watching 93L, and the latest coordinates are there on the left-hand side of your screen, 30.3 north and 84.9 west. So that puts it over the Florida Panhandle. The low is currently over land. Therefore, the recon aircraft investigation was canceled again for today. There is one scheduled in case the center kind of starts to slide its way back over water, but as long as it's over land, we'll see limited development and less likely of becoming a tropical depression or a tropical storm. Still got one model that's calling for a tropical depression, but we'll kind of have to wait and see because those waters that are right there off the coast of Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, and Louisiana are extremely warm. So if that center gets over there, that core could ramp up pretty quickly, and you can have a tropical depression or a tropical storm in a short period of time. So we'll get to all of that in just a minute. First, our temperature, 90 degrees here in Lafayette under partly cloudy skies. Our feels like temp is 98. Dew points are still pretty high, humidity 59%. But since we're on the west side of this low, we are seeing more of a northerly breeze today out of the northwest at 3, and the pressure starting to come down at 30.03. And looking at the radar right now, I'm going to use the Hammond radar because that's where all the action is right now. Unfortunately, most of the action is in the offshore waters. And I will say the coastal parishes down there, you're talking about Plaquemine and Lafourche and over toward Terrebonne parishes and Jefferson Parish down to the south and St. Charles as well. Those folks are probably going to get the bulk of the super heavy rain if this indeed happens. And then there's still going to be a heavy rain threat for the areas of the North Shore through Baton Rouge and then back southwest into portions of Acadiana. We will look at some of those rainfall totals. So even though it's a little less likely that we're going to see an official tropical system, you do need to prepare for the possibility of some heavy rain. And there's some interesting rainfall total solutions out there. And we're going to show you not just models, but also the official forecast from the National Weather Service here locally over in Lake Charles. But just to remind you that the way this Gulf air is so juicy and the way this low is drifting off toward the west, we've seen this kind of scenario a number of times, and we've seen some pretty good rainfall producers. And I have to say that this is a similar setup that what we saw in the flood of 2016. Now, we're not saying that that's what this is going to be, but this is kind of a similar setup. So I think that's why it has a few more folks on edge this time around. And I know there's a lot of us here that are older, and you think, 2016 seems like yesterday, but that was 9 years ago. So that we have these time periods between floods, and a 10-year time period between a big flood is certainly enough time when we do see some of these flood events, within 2 or 5 or even 7 years. So again, not saying that's what this is going to be, but it does have some similarities by the way the whole system is kind of coming together. Real quick look outside at some of the traffic cams. Kind of a pretty day here in Lafayette, although it is on the hot side, but we're not seeing a whole lot of rain out there. And as we travel along the Gulf Coast, you got some stormy skies offshore of Panama City Beach, and it's a little bit cloudy there over Orange Beach as well. But again, most of the action has been out in the offshore waters. So you can see the clouds out in the Gulf from Dauphin Island, and got some storminess there close to Cocodrie. And then farther to the west, it looks like a nice day over near Galveston with some partly cloudy skies and some mild temperatures. And if you are going to be doing some boating today or even early tomorrow, you're going to be okay. But the thunderstorms are going to start to work their way westward. And you have to remember that those winds and seas are considerably higher when you have thunderstorms in and around the region. So we'll start out with the National Hurricane Center's tropical weather outlook, and that has pretty much remained unchanged. About 40% chance or so of some development. But again, the low pressure area is going to have to scoot its way into the offshore waters before we're going to see any organization. And right now, even though you see a big blob of convection there off the southeastern Louisiana coast and over the coast of Mississippi and Alabama, the low pressure area is currently way over here, right along the Florida Panhandle. But the center of that appears to still be over land. So we're not seeing any intensification, nor are we starting to see anything winding up to get together. But The biggest concern is the amount of moisture that this trough of low pressure will have as it moves off toward the west. And again, there's still a little more uncertainty of where this is going to start to make more of a northern turn and then get picked up by the westerlies and then shot out to, across the eastern half of the country and eventually back out into the Atlantic. But if it continues to move as slow as what we're seeing, that's where we're getting a little more anxious about the possibility of heavy rains. Not only will the atmosphere be juicy enough to produce torrential rains, but because this system's going to be with us Thursday, Friday, and probably part of Saturday, that's where we're getting a little more concerned when it comes to those heavy rainfall totals over a number of days. So again, there's the low right there, and it is kind of drifting off toward the west, maybe west-northwest. Looks like it was moving more northwest this morning and kind of drifting a little more in a due westerly direction here over the last several hours, but there's the low pressure area according to the analysis we had earlier this morning. So this is probably a little farther west over to around Destin right now. And the spaghetti plots are pretty much on top of each other. We're not looking at a very long range here, only about 48 to 72 hours total. So the general movement is expected to drift westward. But again, if we can get that center back over the water, we might have a tropical depression before it reaches the New Orleans area sometime on Thursday. But most of the intensity models, at least for the next, let's say 24, 48 into 72 hours. So that's kind of the line right there going out to 72 hours. You can see none of the models bring it up to tropical storm force, but there's several of them that go tropical depression. And all this that's out here several hours down the road, that might be the low, maybe re-intensifying if it makes its way back over the Atlantic. So don't look at that. We only need to be concerned about the next 72 hours for us here locally when it comes to 93L. So the flood potential is going to be quite high, and this is the excessive rainfall outlook for Friday. So Thursday, we're under a slight risk for flooding, and then on Friday, most of the Acadiana region is under a moderate risk. So that's level 3 out of 4, so that's a pretty good indication that rainfall is going to be out there. And there's a flood watch that's been posted. It'll start tomorrow morning at 7 and will continue through Saturday evening. So again, we're talking Thursday is probably when things will start to get started over the eastern half of Acadiana and southeastern Louisiana. And then at least the central and eastern part of the Acadiana region will get into the action as we get into Thursday afternoon. And depending on if this thing starts to make more of a turn to the north, you see those western parishes are not covered under a flood watch. And that's the indication of this thing pulling inland eventually and maybe not bringing as much rain off toward the west. So here's the official forecast from the National Weather Service over in Lake Charles. And you can find this on their website. I've got the link down below in the description, as well as other links that you can go to and look at your own analysis and maybe create your own forecast. But for the most part, it's calling for about a 4 to 6 rainfall event from Lafayette Parish down southeastward toward Morgan City, and then less as you go a little bit farther toward the west. But as far as those heavier amounts of rain, there are some models that are picking up. So this is what you're looking at for the average. But remember, the atmosphere is going to be very, very juicy. So you could get pockets of rain that dump that 1, 2, or 3 inch an hour rainfall, and you can easily pick up higher amounts than this. So the flood risk is going to be there, and the flood risk is going to stick around at least through the early part of Saturday. But I would expect on average about 4 inches of rain here in Lafayette. West, you should see a little bit less and then more as you move off toward the southeast. But remember, this is just the average. So you could see considerably higher, but you could also see considerably lower. But this is what I would bet on here for the next 3 days. So this is the expected rainfall according to the Euro model. And again, it's about the same as what we're seeing from the official forecast from the National Weather Service. You're seeing about a 2, maybe up to a 4-inch rain there over extreme southeastern Louisiana, and then the Acadiana region has a little bit less, but I did want to share with you some of the other models. There's the GFS, and again, it's got a bit of a spot there over southeastern portions of Louisiana, and this is the 120-hour forecast, so this is for the next 5 days. There's the Euro again, and you can see it pinpoints more of the heavier rains in the offshore waters. The Canadian model has some higher amounts, but you can see most of that is out in the offshore waters waters too. And the icon seems to focus more of its attention for the heavier amounts of rain out in the offshore waters, which is actually some pretty good news. But let's go into some of the shorter range models. And this one, let's go ahead and pull this one out as far as it'll go. So this is going out 84 hours. So it's a little bit less than what the other one is. But you do see there are some pockets of heavy rain here across the Acadiana region. And in some cases, some of those amounts are pushing over 7 inches of rain. So there's where we're talking about the average should be about 4 to 6, but there could be some spotty areas. Now, this map isn't pinpointing exactly where those heavy rains are going to be, but it is suggesting that we could see some very significant rainfall out there. Some of our other higher resolution models are doing the same, somewhere about 4 inches of rain around the Acadiana area with some pockets of rain getting upwards of about 8 or so. So yes, there will be a flood risk for most of the Acadiana region. I would say Lafayette and eastward will have the better chance for seeing some of this flooding rain. But I would kind of hunker down for a good 4, maybe 6 inch rainfall over the course of 3 days. Now, if we can get 4 inches over the course of maybe 3 or 4 days, we probably won't have too many problems. But some of those heavier downpours that get stuck over one area, that's where you end up seeing the issues out there. And that's exactly what we saw back in the flood of 2016. You had these rains that just ended up hovering right over the areas east of Baton Rouge. And then, of course, we all know here in Lafayette down toward Youngsville and Broussard, it really just kind of stuck over those areas. And that's why we saw some regions picking up 20 and even 30 inches of rain. So hopefully we're not going to see that amount of rain in any area out of 93L. So let's real quick, we're just going to go through the 5-day model again, since we're kind of in a short range. And the GFS has a rain event coming in, maybe a weak low pressure area, but it doesn't appear here on Thursday or even Friday that there's an actual tropical system. And the same goes for the Euro. It is not forecasting an actual tropical system. It's just forecasting a decent rain event. The Canadian model seems to be hinting maybe at a low drifting south of Louisiana and perhaps becoming a tropical depression farther down the road. But at least going into Thursday, we're not seeing anything becoming a tropical depression between now and sometime tomorrow afternoon. And finally, the icon, which was really the strongest of our models over the last several days, has fallen back quite a bit, but it is still calling for a low pressure area to finally form right before making its way on land over southeastern Louisiana, or perhaps going into portions of Louisiana. So that there appears that we're going to be seeing a tropical depression, at least there over southeastern Louisiana. So at this point, the GFS, the Euro, and the Canadian have no storm between now and tomorrow. The icon calls for a depression there off the southeastern Louisiana coast, but the Canadian does show maybe the forming of a depression closer to Vermilion Bay or Cameron Parish before moving inland, but that wouldn't be until Friday. So that's really kind of the only difference that we're seeing when it comes to our global model solutions. Remember, those water temperatures are very, very warm there over the Louisiana coast. So we've got some fairly low wind shear in that region. So if that low wants to swirl its way over the waters, if it's got maybe 24 hours over those extremely warm waters where you could possibly feel some tropical depression winds or maybe in some tropical storm force winds. And the heat potential along the northern Gulf Coast isn't nearly as high as what we're seeing farther to the south. Remember, this is the measurement of the 80-degree water and how deep it goes below the surface. So if you've got a tropical system that's trying to form, it can churn up some of these warmer waters from below, and sometimes you get some rapid intensification. But the shear analysis there along the northern Gulf Coast, we've got shear over South Florida, we've got shear over the western part of the Gulf, but it does look like there's some low wind shear there. So there between about Apalachicola and the New Orleans area, again, there might be that window of opportunity where it could spin up to be a tropical depression. As far as Cameron Parish right now, I would go ahead and keep your plans, at least at this point, Roll Tide. The reason is because the heaviest amounts of rain are expected to stay a little bit farther toward the east, and I love going down to Cameron Parish, so I wouldn't cancel it. But just kind of keep an eye on the forecast here over the next couple of days. So let's move on and look at what else we got going on. So again, really the just to summarize everything, at this point, it doesn't look like we're going to have a tropical system, or if we do, it's just going to be a tropical depression. And I would prepare for Thursday, Friday to be very rainy days with some heavy downpours coming in, and then things will start to taper off as we get into Saturday. Sunday, again, is looking pretty good. So Roll Tide, if you're going down into Cameron Parish on Saturday and Sunday, you'll probably starting to see some improving conditions by that point in time. So there's a look at the Caribbean or the Central American satellite, and really very quiet compared to what we've seen for most of the tropical hurricane season. Even though we haven't had any tropical systems develop over Central America, they transitioned over into the Pacific Ocean and eventually became tropical systems. Caribbean looks fine. I don't see any issues out there. A little bit of a tropical wave well to the south of, let's say, Trinidad and the southern Windward Islands. And some of those tropical waves that were out over the middle part of the Atlantic don't look quite as impressive. And as we look a little bit farther out to the east, they, again, don't look quite as impressive as what we were seeing yesterday. So computer models really don't show a whole lot there over the next week or two. And even the global tropics hazard outlook that goes into week 2 and week 3, this was released yesterday. So it's calling for no tropical development here over the next 2 weeks. But I will say the GFS is showing another scenario of maybe something kind of forming here over the eastern part of the Atlantic and maybe a ridge coming in north of it and trying to slide something off toward the west. And unfortunately, that looks to be coming in around next weekend. So even though the tropics hazard outlook doesn't show anything for the next couple of weeks, I think the southeastern United States or perhaps the East Coast could remain active here over the next couple of weeks. But that is expected as we start to get more into July and eventually as we cross into August. That GFS model goes all the way out to August 1st now. So we're in the ballpark of where we're going to see the intensity and the number of tropical systems really starting to skyrocket. By the way, the peak of the hurricane season is usually known to be right around September the 10th. And then we have quite a bit of action here along the northern Gulf Coast through about the third week in October. And then usually we can kind of catch our breath. But last year, remember, hurricane season kind of pushed its way well into November. So it doesn't mean we're out of the woods by any means. We haven't even reached halftime yet for the hurricane season. And again, with this here, and I would assume there's probably a few more folks grabbing some extra items for the next several days just so that they don't have to go anywhere. But when you have hurricanes and tropical storms and even tropical depressions, these are kind of the basic items that you can grab at the stores and just keep on hand. I'll say that I would guess that most of these items are available right now, considering this might not even become a tropical depression and would be more of a flood event. There's probably not going to be a whole lot of folks running out to grab supplies like this because we're not really expecting power outages or things like that. But it's always good to have these things on hand well ahead of any tropical weather coming our way. So kind of glance over this, and if you've got a lot of these things, maybe put them in one separate area so you know where they are when tropical weather starts to come our way. And this is a good way to get yourself kind of ahead of the game. It'll be just one less thing you have to do to prepare when a tropical storm or hurricane comes our way. So again, prepare for some very heavy rain at times, especially over eastern and southeastern Louisiana. I think the New Orleans and Baton Rouge and the North Shore areas will probably see the most rain, but that will extend across the Atchafalaya Basin parishes into Lafayette, St. Landry, Iberia, and into St. Mary and St. Martin. And then gradually those rainfall totals will be less as you go off toward the west. Of course, we'll go over all this again tomorrow morning on Acadiana Weather Today, and you'll get another shot. We'll get another shot at it tomorrow afternoon when we do Let's Talk Tropics. Well, I hope you enjoy our visits here at noon. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel. channel and turn on those notifications. Remember, you can hear my forecasts on Big 102.1, Planet Radio 106.7, and Freedom 95.1. In between, please follow my social media pages. I'll do updates of different models, or if we get some kind of extreme models about rainfall, plus any flood warnings. I'll be posting those on the social media pages, both on Facebook and X. And of course, thanks to everyone who's already subscribed to Acadiana Weather Today. Do me a favor and tell a friend. I'm meteorologist Dave Baker. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday afternoon, and I hope to see you tomorrow morning for Acadiana Weather Today. Have a great day.